How's it going, guys? Double Rim here, back with another game reaction. And today we're going to be talking about the two games that happened last night, the Warriors Grizz game and the Bucks Celtics game. Now, we'll talk about the Warriors game first, just because of my thoughts on this. I just want to get out. That was the worst mother effing game I've seen in my entire fucking life. Holy shit. It was like I was watching a March Madness game. I watched March Madness games that had the same level of execution, discipline, and uh, like intelligence being played with. The Warriors in the first half just couldn't make a fucking shot. They were getting open looks left and right. They were missing shots, and it was like, okay, this is getting weird. Like now, 3 out of the last 4 games, they haven't been able to make a shot, even though they're getting tons of open looks. Obviously, game 3 they scored 144 points, so maybe that's just where all their makes went. But it's still very strange. Like they couldn't hit a fucking shot. No one was playing with any energy except Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney, and Otto Porter Jr. Those were the only 3 guys on the Warriors who were playing and treating this game like it was important. The rest of the team, it felt like watching it, and I'm dead serious when I say this, it felt like a back-to-back in January against like a tanking team. Like, because the Warriors usually get up for good teams in the regular season, but this felt like they were like, oh yeah, like there's a Spurs game earlier this year, or that Pacers game earlier this year, where it was just like, oh yeah, whatever, the Spurs, blah blah blah, the Pacers, it's just a bad team. We're just gonna come out here, and that's how they looked. They looked absolutely terrible, just a disgrace. They were not playing up to their potential whatsoever, and it was just baffling because it was like, guys, this is the playoffs. This is an opportunity to take complete control of this series, and you guys are just treating it like it's a back-to-back in January against a team that's not very good. So that was pretty disappointing. Shout out though to Otto Porter Jr., Kevon Looney, and Andrew Wiggins. Though they played great. Um, Curry then kind of played well in the fourth quarter after he changed his shoes. He hit his free throws, made a few jumpers, a big mid-ranger over 2 Grizzlies defenders to like tie the game. That was a huge shot. And opinion on Curry here. So Curry has clearly lost some confidence in his three-pointer. His skill, I think, is identical, but his mental state is just like, especially looking from last year to this year, his mental state is not the same. So I think Curry needs to stop shooting threes, start shooting like 8 a game, 7 a game, and then start leaning into mid-range scoring, because his mid-range jumper this whole year and this playoffs is just so wet, and it feels like he makes it almost every time. So I think he should really lean into his mid-range scoring, especially since his confidence for the three is not there. He's also attacking the rim at will. It's really good to see because earlier in the year he struggled with that. So it's nice to see him attacking, getting to the paint, and scoring layups. It's just good for to see for his long-term prospects and the Warriors' title hopes. Now on the Grizzlies side of things, really hard fought win, or not hard fought win, really hard fought game. They played pretty bad, to be honest. They weren't playing great defense on the Warriors, even though the Warriors struggled offensively. They just were missing a lot of open shots. But I got to give credit because they did go big. They brought Steven Adams in, and no John Morant either. So they didn't have as much defenders to hunt, right? They didn't have as much negative defenders on the floor. Plus, Steven Adams gave the Warriors just like a different look, and they seemed a little confused by it, not really sure how to attack the Grizzlies. But overall, they had a solid game. They could have won. They had a chance to win, but they just didn't have their go-to scorer. Dylan Brooks was the guy they were trying to rely on late in game. Jaren Jackson Jr., right? These guys are good players, but they're not fourth quarter ISO scorers. So that's really what done them in. The Warriors just played like the older, more experienced team in the fourth, and it's pretty cliche, but that's just how it went down. Still think the Grizzlies are a great team. I think next year, if the Warriors and them play again, the Grizzlies are really going to be pissed, and the Warriors will be a year older. So if they play again, it's going to be an epic rivalry. But anyways, now to talk about the Boston Bucks game. This was a crazy game because the Bucks were up most of the game. They were outplaying them. They were outplaying the Celtics. They were playing better defense, and they were getting to the cup. Giannis was scoring. Drew was doing his little, back down, like guard post moves and stuff. Um, but they weren't really having a free flowing offense like they have a few other games where their shooters are getting involved, like Pat Connaughton, Portis, and the likes. So that was definitely what did them in because the Celtics in the late game. Now, the Bucks, the reason I picked the Celtics to win this series before I even knew Chris Middleton was injured is because watching the Bucks last year, even though they won the title, didn't give me a lot of confidence in their offense, especially when they face high level teams. And last year, what was the best team they faced? I mean, Phoenix or the Nets. And I feel like both of those teams are not as good as the typical best team in the NBA, right? Like the Bucks' opponents were not as good as the Warriors of the past or the Cavaliers of the past or even the Rockets or Thunder of the past, right? Like their opponents were pretty low level, and that's not going to last forever. So I feel like this year, the Boston Celtics are a lot better. Phoenix is better than they were last year. The Warriors are back. Um, and I just feel like there's more competition in the league this year. And I felt like watching the Bucks last year, their offense was just so infuriating because Giannis can get to the cup at will, but he shoots threes for no reason. He just pulls them up like he's Curry or something. So it's really annoying to watch them play because Giannis will just throw away possessions shooting threes. Um, their offense will become super stagnant, no ball movement, no player movement, and ISO scoring. And yes, Giannis can, but then the ISO scoring also devolves into, oh, Giannis taking a jumper. So I just really didn't think the Bucks offense could win them a championship this year. Their defense obviously can, but their offense is really suspect. And that's why I thought they'd lose. And it showed in this game. This game is a poster child for why I didn't think the Bucks would win. Yes, they were in control. Yes, their defense was great. But once Boston started hitting some shots, Tatum hit some jumpers. Marcus Smart was hitting some. Marcus Smart was kind of Drew Holiday, like backing him in the post and hitting shots. Al Horford was hitting shots. Obviously, Al Horford had a huge game. Like once because in the NBA, sometimes even if you have the best defense in the league, the other team just makes shots, you're going to lose. And it's as simple as that. And Boston made some shots. Milwaukee does not have the offensive firepower to even keep up with Boston making shots. And that's why they lost the game. And that's why I didn't predict they're going to win the finals. That's why I still think Boston is going to win. And that's why I always thought Boston was going to win, even if Chris Middleton was there. So those are my reactions. I'll quickly talk about the other two series. Sixers and 6. Embiid being back is just a huge boost for them. Miami Heat. I know they've shot a lot of threes and had a lot of good looks these last few games, but I feel like the Heat just have less talent than the Sixers. I mean, Embiid's the best player, and I guess Jimmy's probably better than Harden at this point, but Harden is the third best player, and like if you have two of the top 3 players, you're usually going to win a series. So that's kind of what it boils down to. And the playoffs sometimes are just that simple. Like the regular season is a lot more complicated than the playoffs because the playoffs really focus in on talent and who's just the better player. Also, the Mavericks Suns. Now, this is a super interesting one. I still think the Suns win, but I don't know if I've been saying it on this YouTube channel all year, but the Suns are a really, really like Spurs reminiscent team. You know what I mean? And that's not to say the Spurs weren't a great team. Obviously they were. They won 5 championships. But they did it in 15 years, right? You don't usually see that kind of consistency. You usually see a short run of, 2 to, 6 years of dominance, but you never see 15 years of consistency with a few championships thrown in there. And that's what the Spurs did, and that's what this Suns team feels like. There were tons of years where the Spurs had the best record in the league, top 3 record. They won a championship the year before, but then they lose in the second round. Then they get bounced in the first round by the 8th seed, right? Which happened in 2012 or 13 by the Grizzlies. And that's what the Spurs team feels like. It's a really good team. If Chris Paul was like 3 years younger or 4 years younger, I feel like it would bode well for them because I would predict that if the Suns had 5 years of this exact play going on, they'd win one championship. But because of their like how they play and how consistent they are, how reliant on depth they are, and how really they don't have a top uh, 10 player on their team, that it's hard to dominate in the playoffs. And I feel like their ceiling is lower than pretty much any other team in the playoffs, but their floor is higher, right? So over a long period of time, that consistently will help out in the long run. But in just one or two playoffs, I feel like it won't. And I 100% think the Warriors will beat them if they play. And I think the Mavericks have a really good chance to beat them because Luka is the best player in the series, right? He's the best player. So it's going to be really interesting to see where the Sun series goes. Um, but I'm excited to watch those games later tonight. All right. Thank you for watching. Double Room out.